Okay, here's this week's Does It Pencil webinar. This week's webinar is dedicated to the graduating class of 2025. What I did this week was to put together a list what I think are 10 of the most important things about money that young people need to think about moving forward in life. So if you have a young person in your life you think would benefit from this, please do share it. And we do the Does It Pencil webinar every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Pacific. So hope to see you there. Thanks. Okay, so the first one is it takes a lot. Let me put it this way. It's a lot easier to lose money than it is to make money. It goes faster than it comes in. And it is what I call a universal truth and somewhat of an anomaly about people's relationships with money. And not surprisingly, and this might apply to some of you, I don't know, and I don't want to hear if it does, that people struggle with this their whole lives. You know, I mean, at one point, I've looked at a couple of the women that I've been with in my life, and I've actually said to them, and I've used these words, are you allergic to money? Because it's like, as soon as they would get it, they were just like, oh, I have to go spend it. You know, and you know, they'll kind of segue me into the next one. But this is the first thing, because as we go through life, and I'm just talking about money, I'm not talking anything else, one of the objects of the game should be collection, to end up with some. And in America, we call that retirement. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is this. It's what I call the master-slave relationship. And I've used this term before, and some people get, you know, kind of offended because I use the word slave. Well, it's 2025, it's not 1825. And basically what I mean is this. Again, mindset. Everybody needs to decide who's working for who. And I know people, and you probably know people, who have more money than they'll probably ever spend, and yet they get up every day and live their life and work themselves to death as if they are broke, or they're so cheap and miserly that they'll never enjoy what they've spent all their lifetime accumulating. Okay? So this is a thing about balance. And I was telling somebody when I was teaching last week, when I teach, I tend to use kind of exaggerated examples because they make the point, and I only have so much time. Okay? So if I throw a punch, I got to try to make it stick. And I think this master-slave thing is a perfect analogy for each of us to make an individual personal assessment of who's working for who. Okay? And as we get older, again, I'm talking to an 18-year-old right now, I think that one of the goals should very much be to accumulate enough money so that it's working for you. At least mostly, you know. And that doesn't happen like that. I think the healthy way is a phase-in kind of a thing. I think that one of the smartest things ever invented was semi-retirement, because I've known more than one person who worked for a more formalized organization and got a formal retirement, and they stopped working, and then they got more problems than they've had in the last 35 years because they don't know what to do, where to go, how to be, purpose, all that kind of thing. So I think that a phase in to that moment in life where you really do have money working for you it's a smarter strategy. Okay, that's just my opinion. Well, these are all just my opinions, but there's one of them. Okay, number 3, and I think this one's huge. Learn to live a little below your means. Okay? Now, this is the thing about money in an adult life. We're trying to pay for what I call in the collective our means, okay? Your lifestyle, house you buy, car you drive, spouse you have, trips you take, all the things that, you know, cost money. Money consciousness, which I'll get to on the list here, I think is a really important step to know this is how much it takes me to sustain a lifestyle that makes me content. Okay, now I don't want to spend a lot of time today parsing words, but I choose the word contentment intentionally. I didn't choose happy. I chose content. And this is where things get very muddled in a lot of people's lives with money and things. I know people who, and I'm just going to use numbers here to illustrate. Again, I'm kind of exaggerating, but not totally. I know people who make $50,000, $60,000 a month pretty easily, okay, even more. And they live a $70,000 to $80,000 a month lifestyle with all the shit that they've accumulated. I know people that make $8,000 a month and live a $7,000 a month lifestyle. Who's more content? Obviously, human B. Okay, so this understanding what your means are and then deliberately living a little bit below it, I think that is the ticket to a sustained life of contentment in your relationship with money. Okay? All right. Number 4, be an owner. Okay? And I've said this before. I'm 63. And, well, let me back up a step here. And I'm still 63. My parents didn't teach me anything about what I'm going to tell you today. None of it. Zip, zero, nada. In fact, I'll tell you guys this. I'll probably edit it from the video. But my dad died when I was 25. And my father he went to Stanford. He's a well-educated, upstanding, upper middle class guy in the community. Lots of people knew him, all that kind of thing. He died when he was 53. Just poop, he was gone. And my parents never really talked to me about money. Okay. I mean, I got a quarter when I mowed the lawn and stuff like that. And they helped me with a checking account. And those are all good things, but they never talked to me about the things that I'm talking to you about right now. And one of the things that I never knew about my parents until my dad died is they were broke. They had income, but they really had no savings. And my dad was an insurance man, and my mother got over $1 million. I remember this when he passed away. Without that, she would have been screwed. And these are two people that lived a life that most people in American society in the 60s, 70s, and 80s said, this is what you should do, get an education, buy a house, have a couple kids, send them to school. They did all that stuff, and they did it pretty well, I think. I'm not demeaning the memory of my deceased parents. I'm just saying that, in my parents' mid-50s, they had nothing, and that's not good. Okay. And it doesn't have to be that way. That's the thing. And never sat me down and said, look, this is how this thing works. And you should be trying to do A, B, C, and D. That's my point, is that nobody ever told me this stuff. And nobody ever told me, and this is what I wish they would have told me, buy things, own things, and not stupid things, not things that go down in value, but buy stocks, buy real estate, start a business, things of this nature. And that is the thing about participating in the American economy and all its ups, downs, gyrations, politics, tariffs, all the drama, everything else we've all lived through in our lifetimes that we've all lived through. Over time, that ability to own things is really, in the long term, what will take care of you. Okay? And again, I say, it's a mindset. All right? Number 5, keep your books. Now we could do at least a 1-day seminar, and for some of us, a 7-day seminar on how to do this. And I could bring in, 3 therapists and 2 accountants and probably all the other professional help that some of us need. But to just keep this simple, on plane and on point, you need to develop a system to manage your personal finances. And my counsel is this: you don't have to do it to the freaking penny. That's not necessary. I mean, Gary emailed me, I think it was yesterday, the day before. He says, hey, what do you recommend to use as a software to keep track of finances? And I said, Quicken, not QuickBooks, Quicken, electronic check register. It's one of the best things ever invented, because what it does is allows you to do reporting. You got to do some time on the front end setting up and seeing what you got. But having money consciousness about every month, and I think a month is a good time increment, I spend this much on food, this much on insurance, all the other costs of living. And, I've talked to a lot of people about this over the years, and some people are pretty good about it. They are. I'm not going to lie about that. But I think in my personal experience of asking people these direct questions, most people that I've ever talked to don't know. And some of them don't know about their personal life or their finances. They just figure, I have money coming in, I'm surviving, all good. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think to again go back to the first part of what I said, to try to have a functional and healthy relationship in your life with money, and I'm talking to a young person right now, get a system. And there's so many things floating around in the internet right now. It's not hard. We live in a time when it's never been easier or cheaper to find some system that works for you. Gary went and got Quicken, okay? He's working with his bank. What's going to happen when they get the bugs worked out is all he's going to have to do after he gets his categories set up is press a button, and it'll download an entire monthly bank statement into the register. Poof, done. 5 seconds. Okay, and then set up your categories, and then you can see reports. But you have to keep your books. Okay. All right. Number 6. Independence is better than dependence. Again, mindset. Okay. So when I wrote the blog this week, basically, and it's all tongue in cheek, like a lot of my writing is, but I thought, okay, what is the best advice that I would give an 18-year-old young woman right now? Here's what it would be. Learn to make your own money. Do not be beholden to a boy for money. And what happens later in life, I'm just making this up. It's not a real life example in my life, but it's when you don't think you need something that you usually end up needing it. So a young woman, for example, that meets a rich man, again, just making this up, and says, I don't have to work, I'm going to be taken care of. And then something happens, that's not good. Doesn't need to be that way. So I am very strong on every young person, regardless of their gender. You got to learn how to take care of yourself. You do. And we live in a very strange time right now. And if what I'm going to say next is a part of your world, I hope that it works out. I'll just put it that way. But I have a surprising number of friends with children late 20s and 30s who still live at home and or don't work. Surprising number. And in that demographic, most of them are young men. I don't know what it is, but it's a thing. And it's a societal thing, and it's a demographic thing. And I read all sorts of different stuff, but some of the futurists that I read sometimes, they're talking about how, if you look at generations, we have a real problem 20 years from now because young men aren't having sex, and we're not going to have enough people to sustain a growing economy. Whole nother topic, not getting into that today. But I'm saying, regardless of gender for young people, I think that this mindset of I can take care of myself and then go do it, it's one of the best things anybody can ever do for their kids, right? So mindset, do your best to get that in those people. Number 7, and when I die, just make sure they put these 3 letters on my headstone. TVM, time value of money. I was thinking yesterday, how many people are just going to go, God, I'm so glad to listen to that guy talk about time value of money anymore. Well, it's so bloody important. It just is. And I think the younger you can learn this and learn, excuse me, how it works, how to roll it into your life, and all the utility that time value of money brings, it just permeates so many parts of our lives, not just mortgage payments. Okay, so sometimes I look at the world and I think, this is all kind of tongue in cheek. I go, oh, when I'm president, this is all going to change. I think of all the useless crap that I learned in high school, especially with math and calculus and this, that, the other thing. Man, I wish they would have taught me time value of money. It really would have helped. Number 8. This is going pretty quick. Nobody's left yet. That's always nice. Taxes. Okay. Again, I'm talking to a young person, and my basic advice is, the 20% rule. You get your first job, you're making whatever you're making. We'll just say $50,000 a year. I'm gonna look at them and say, "No, you're not." Sure, I am. No, you're not. You're making 40. Because 20% of it's just gone before you even see it. And I think, for me and a lot of people I've talked to, excuse me, especially young people, until they have the experience of seeing that sucked out of their check, they don't really get how much it really is. It's significant. So getting a basic tax education, I think, is very important. God, sorry about that. Not just for business people, but for anybody. Okay, because this affects everyday life, at least does in America. Number 9, and this one is huge. Never run out of cash. Liquidity. And I've seen people do it. It's not good. And what I wrote in the blog this week is, in American money systems, there are 2 forms that we use. And all you that in the real estate business, you've seen this on loan applications. There's a profit and loss statement, and there's a balance sheet. Okay? 2 separate things. Profit and loss measures liquidity. A balance sheet measures equity. Now, those of us who work in the real estate industry with, a lot of equity and stuff going around, we kind of get punch drunk on these numbers, and I've been listening to it for years. I was up on Mercer Island last weekend. I toured a house with a friend of mine, and, it's an $8.7 million house. And so we're in this conversation talking about how the house was remodeled, and we're just throwing, hundreds of thousands of dollars around, like it's nothing. Well, we've all been in those conversations, and obviously Mercer Island's one of those places where you just add 3 zeros. But that's not liquidity, okay? And that's what I'm talking about here. And I'm talking to a young person, and maybe a not young person. Don't run out of cash. And that all ties into the liquidity and all that kind of thing. One of the things that I started doing in my 30s, and this was not intentional, I kind of had hesitancy of doing it, but I started making small loans to friends and businesses, and I would charge them interest, and they call that micro lending, I guess, if you do it on the internet. But what was kind of weird about that, and these were people who were older than me, and they had run out of cash, and they needed cash because they didn't follow this rule. Don't run out of cash. Okay. Now I'm going to just do a side note here, because what I'm saying here, this little mantra of don't run out of cash, I have found this especially true in a certain circumstance that I've been in twice, and I've counseled other people more than twice, a lot more than twice. And that is when someone passes away and you're closing an estate as an executor, an executrix, or a trustee. Okay. It's not cheap to die in America. And I don't care how much equity you have, doesn't matter. You've got to pay these bills, especially your tax, if it's owed. If you don't, they take your stuff and they sell it. They do. It's a police state when it comes to that kind of thing. Now, it's a little sidebar, but this thing about liquidity, it's very, very important. Okay. And that brings us to number 10. Okay. And there are two approaches to how I'm going to recommend people approach number 10. Number 10 is 2 words, and the words are give back. Now, many years ago, someone told me something that stuck with me, and it's very simple, and it went like this. When you're young, you have lots of time and no money. And when you're old, you have lots of money and no time. Okay? So time and money shift, or they should, as we move on in age. So a lot of people default when I say, you got to think about giving back. And they're like, oh, well, I got to write a check. Well, no, you don't. Look what I'm doing right now. Look what I do every week. Okay. And this is just one of the things that I do. I mean, some of these blogs I write in 10 minutes. Some of them take several hours. I've never made 1 cent off of that. But I've just learned in my life, this is something that I can do to help others. And that's a mindset. Okay. And I think that instilling that mindset in young people is very important for a couple reasons. Okay. One is it helps the world be a better place. And whether I don't give a damn about politics, I'm just saying in the collective, we could all use a little more of that, right? And it takes each of us to have that mindset to make the biggest impact. The other reason that I say it is that when you give, it makes you happy. It just does. And I have friends who are my age who are very well off, and they don't give the world a damn thing. And that's ridiculous. So, I used to live in Utah. A lot of people there are a member of a church that you may or may not be aware of. And I'm not a member of that church, but it's 10%. You got to pay the ticket. That's what they do. It's called tithing. Well, that's one way to do it. Volunteering is another way. Lots of ways to do it. But if you go back to something called Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you've ever studied psychology, and if you've never seen that, you should look it up. It's like a triangle. It's very smart. But what I'm going to draw from Maslow right now is if you don't have your basic needs met, you cannot move up the hierarchy to the top, which is self-actualization. So you got to handle your money life and at least say, at least hopefully be a little bit above raw survival to be able to have the sense of yourself, your place in the world, and the resources to be able to give back. Okay? So take care of yourself first, but once you've checked that box, throw a little back. That's all I'm saying. Okay? All right. Quick review. Money is easier to lose than make. Make a decision, mindset. Who's the master? Who's the slave? Learn what your means are and try to live a little bit below them. Be an owner or have that aspiration. And I'm going to just go back to that one for just a second, okay? So there's a term in business and in basic economics. It's 3 words that go like this. It's called barriers to entry, okay? So a lot of you guys are in the real estate industry. And, as time has moved on, especially in the post-COVID time, the barrier to entry to get in is a lot higher. It's called the down payment. And I'm certainly an advocate of owning real estate, for sure. But I'm also saying that if you look at the stock market, which I've talked about a lot on this call, much lower barrier to entry. You can open an account for $100 and be in the market, or 500, whatever it is, depending on where you go. Okay. But again, mindset, buy stuff, own it, be an owner. Number 5, keep your books. You don't have to be super meticulous about it, but don't be a complete dum-dum and in total denial either. Strive to be independent. So important to tell young people this. Such a big deal. I'll tell you, in my life, when I was 18, I couldn't get far enough and fast enough away from my world. I got as far as Pullman, and they said, you got to stop. You can't go any further. I mean, I wanted to go to CU Boulder. I got accepted, but we couldn't pay for that. But learn independence, super important. Time value of money. That is the number one financial skill that people can learn, and I think they should. Number 8, get a basic education, a fundamental understanding about taxation in America. And what I wrote in the blog was this: pay what you owe and nothing more. Okay? It boils my blood, and I've said this before, when these politicians get up and go, oh, rich people have to pay their fair share. Well, that is such a mathematical lie. So, but that's all people hear. Like, oh, rich people are getting away with murder. No, they're not. I know a lot of rich people. They pay more taxes than most people make in a year, and they're still rich. Okay? Be tax efficient. Don't be a tax fraud. Okay? Never run out of cash. And once you've learned to take care of yourself, you beautiful 18-year-old, give a little back. And that's what I got.